On June 25, 1982, West Germany and Austria met in the final game of Group 2 at the 1982 World Cup at the El Molinón Stadium in Gijon, Spain. The West Germans sat third in the group, needing a win to advance to the knockout stages. The Austrians just needed a draw, but a West German win by 1 or 2 goals would see both teams through. The West Germans threw everyone forward in the opening minutes before Horst Rubesch's header opened the scoring. What followed was one of the greatest controversies in World Cup history, the events of which altered the structure of the tournament forever. The West Germans entered the tournament as one of the favorites. World Cup champions in 1974, finalists at the Euros in 1976, and European champions in 1980, West Germany had become a powerhouse in world football and were expected to make a lengthy run in 1982. West Germany seemed to receive a fairly easy draw on the first group stage. Chile had either not qualified or gone out in the group stage in the previous 4 tournaments, while Austria had exited in the second round 4 years earlier and failed to qualify for the 3 tournaments preceding that. Lastly, there were the perceived minnows of the group making their first ever appearance at a World Cup: Algeria. The Africans were by far the least established team in the group and perhaps in the tournament. Aside from the FLN football team, a de facto Algerian national team playing in exile in the late 1950s while the country fought a war of independence from France, there wasn't a recognized Algerian national team until 1963. Nicknamed Les Fennecs, or the Desert Foxes, they were punching bags in Africa for 2 decades. They qualified for the African Cup of Nations in 1968, but missed the following 5 tournaments, struggling to establish themselves even on the continental stage. Then came a shift. The country's so-called golden generation, perhaps the finest group of players Algeria had ever produced, led the Desert Foxes to an unprecedented run to the final of the 1980 African Cup of Nations, the first time the Algerians had any real success in a major tournament. They were led by Lakhdar Belloumi, a brilliant attacking midfielder almost universally considered the greatest Algerian player of all time and one of the greatest African players ever. Belloumi was quick, dynamic, an excellent dribbler with a keen eye for a pass, and he played in behind Rabah Majer, a prolific striker who is perhaps the nation's best ever goalscorer. The two formed one of the best partnerships in African history and were instrumental to Algeria's first ever World Cup qualification. In the final round of qualifying for the 1982 tournament, Algeria took a 2-0 lead over Nigeria into the second leg on home soil. A brilliant strike from Belloumi in the 9th minute gave the Algerians a 3-0 lead on aggregate, and after Nigeria pulled the goal back just before halftime, Majer put the game away in the 85th minute. He picked a long ball out of the sky with a perfect touch, lifted it over a Nigerian defender to find some space, and beat the keeper at the near post with a screamer on his left foot to seal Algeria's ticket to Spain. The European champions, meanwhile, advanced to the 1982 World Cup with ease, winning all 8 qualifiers by an aggregate score of 33-3. The two sides met in Gijon on June 16, 1982, for the group opening game, and the West Germans didn't take their debuting opponents seriously. They ridiculed the Algerians in the pre-match press conference. Midfielder Paul Breitner said, quote, "We will dedicate our 7th goal to our wives and the 8th to our dogs," while manager Yup Derwal joked that if his side lost, he'd take the first train back to Munich. After dominating a scoreless first half, Algeria struck first in the 54th minute, taking the West Germans apart on the counterattack. Belloumi got in behind the German backline and forced a save, before Majer appeared to clean up the rebound and give the Africans a shock lead. Within 10 minutes, West German star Karl-Heinz Rummenigge temporarily restored order, getting on the end of a cross to equalize in the 67th minute. But less than a minute later, Belloumi, who else, scored the winner, ghosting in at the back post to restore the lead. He sprinted toward the Algerian bench, fist raised, one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history complete. The European champions recovered from their shock in Gijon, returning 4 days later to thump Chile 4-1. The Algerians, perhaps a bit drained from the euphoria of their greatest ever victory, were beaten 2-0 by Austria in the second group game. They bounced back to beat Chile 3-2 on the 24th, with Austria and West Germany set to meet on the 25th. Algeria had an excellent chance to go through. A 1 or 2 goal win for West Germany would send them and Austria through, but any other result would secure Algeria's place in the knockout stages. West Germany and Austria knew that. They took advantage of it. After 10 minutes of furious attacking in the final game, the West Germans took the lead, and from there, it was 80 minutes of nothing. Neither team attempted any real attacks, passing the ball around and wasting time. The result suited both teams, and so, they stopped playing. The two sides had colluded to achieve a mutually desired result, ignoring the spirit of the game in the process. An angry crowd booed and jeered, Algerian fans burned peseta banknotes to signal what they believed was corruption, and the German match commentator proclaimed, quote, "Not every end justifies the means." His Austrian counterpart simply refused to speak for the final half hour. The whistle blew, the West Germans and the Austrians were through, and the Algerians were out. It was shameless match fixing in broad daylight, and, in truth, the West Germans got away with it. The Algerian Federation lodged an official protest, but FIFA declined to take any action, stating that no rules were actually broken. The world had seen what had happened, and the game was met with widespread condemnation. But the sport's governing body turned a blind eye. From that point forward, final group games were played at the same time to avoid this sort of collusion, but it was of little solace to an Algerian team that had been robbed of the national team's greatest ever achievement. The West Germans progressed all the way to the final, falling to Italy in Madrid, their crime never punished. For the Algerians, it was the start of a decline. They qualified for the tournament again in 1986, but went out in the groups while only scoring a single goal, and they didn't qualify again until 2010. For their two stars, life was very different after that World Cup. Rabah Majer went on to star for Porto, winning 3 league titles in Portugal and scoring a famous backheel goal to help lift the European Cup in 1987. Lakhdar Belloumi, the best Algerian player ever, never had his chance to shine on the European stage. Barcelona were interested, but he wasn't allowed to leave the country to play abroad until after he was 27, and a dream move to Italian giants Juventus was dashed when he broke his leg in 1985. He still starred for various Algerian clubs into his later years, but he never had a shot at the highest levels. But for a brief moment, Belloumi and Majer were the stars of the world game, the duo at the forefront of an incredible side and a historic upset, before it was all taken away in an instant.